Hi, I'm Tony,
And I'm Dave.
and we are going to do a little demonstration on how to cut a mask when charcoal drawing. All right, here we go.
We're off from reference either.
So we decided to, we're not actually working from reference and we're not drawing from life, but we're presenting you with this simple drawing with some content inside of it, and we are going to show you the steps it's going to take to get this thing turned into a tonal charcoal drawing. Right, Dave? Anything else to add on this part?
The key to this is in sequencing. When you cut this into pieces, it's important to plan your values so as to simplify the process. When first planning on the sequence of cutting, plan the largest shapes, for instance, background in this case first, before cutting your mask into multiple pieces, making it much easier, of course, to handle blocking a background.
Yeah, a lot of times you'll kind of destroy the mask in the process of using it. So sometimes it's a one-shot deal, and that's another good reason to keep the big parts separated out first and still have something to cut. Cut out that profile quickly and roughly. Now, if I'm a little bit off, it doesn't matter too much because, one, we have no real reference, and faces vary a tremendous amount. Also, quite important, I'm rushing this a little bit for the purposes of the demonstration, but if I was really cutting a mask at home, I'd be moving my bottom board a lot more of the time because most people, and a knife is meant to cut in a single direction, and if you are constantly snaking around like this, you're not going to get the best version. And just for the heck of it, I'm going to cut this guy off. And that should get us there. Today we're going to actually be drawing on gray paper, in part because it's much easier to see value working from a center out to the lightest light and the darkest dark as you go.
The mediums will be, as you can see, some pastels.
Here, I'll cruise over here.
Like chalk.
And some charcoal. And we have other sets of tools. We have an X-Acto knife. We also have a nice retractable eraser here. These guys are great. You can actually cut that edge to get a nice sharp point on it.
As well as
where'd it go?
Did it go?
Oh, there it is. Sorry. We also have a kneaded eraser and then something called a chamois, the chamois. And that will help you to spread out the charcoal evenly in a nice film. So the next thing we're going to do is establish a little bit of charcoal on here. Here is our profile, as we said, and we are actually going to make a darker background for this guy to kind of pop off of a little bit. I'm going to put some of my charcoal directly onto the mask itself. I don't know if Dave approves of this.
As long as you can keep track of your drawing for cutting later.
I'll do my best. I could just put it onto the piece. You can kind of just simply move onto it like this. And this gray paper thing, man, it really works, and it is a great way to just get your drawing to come up a little bit. Now, the mask that we're using, I'm holding it with my left hand while I draw with my right, and here I am coming in with the chamois and going to work it into the page gently as we go. But Dave is absolutely correct. If you're not careful as you're going, it's a drag because you can't actually see what you wanted to cut. So you go to all this trouble, speaking of trouble, you go to all this trouble trying to make a nice mask, and then next thing you know, you can't see it because it gets all dirty. But, it is charcoal, and one of the things that's really important about charcoal in general is to just cultivate a kind of spirit of messing it up, fixing it, putting it in there, pulling it back out again. It's a very forgiving and non-exacting medium. And so this guy is pretty much laid out. We have a background value. I prefer if this didn't have this texture here in the background. That's going to come forward. All texture always advances. It would be nicer if it was just this nice softer thing. I thought that that was going to come out. It didn't, but we have the mask on top, and we'll just gently remove that to show you that nice clean edge.
While Tony continues to cut for some of the tighter details of the face, we both want to recommend in any technique to start with the general overall forms, overall values, and then detail last. It's going to help you with your mask as well, so you don't cut it all into little pieces at the very beginning and have to deal with all those little pieces. So as Tony is going here, he's now going to go into the next of the general shapes of the face, again, before he cuts into any more detail. Reassembling the mask can be quite difficult at times, and sometimes easier just to cut another one if you get too many pieces.
You know, Dave, I had a professor in college, and he's a great painter by the name of Roger Anliker. And Roger always said to me, you start general, you wind up specific, because when students begin to do a drawing by starting with an eyelash, he said to me that that is exactly like taking a bunch of Christmas ornaments and throwing them up in the air and trying to jam a tree underneath. It's about as easy.
Great analogy. From across the room, you don't see someone's eyelashes. You see the dark of the socket.
Right.
And that also, you have to get the overall form before any detail will matter.
And that's why in our drawing classes, one of the things you'll hear both of us, anybody teaching drawing, say over and over and over again is squint, 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 squint.
That's right.
Break that form down into the most basic values and volumes that you can see. Just the big dark spots and just the big light spots.
And it doesn't matter the content. It's from landscape to portraiture. It's the same.
This guy's looking more like Batman, but see how he does. Time, just for the heck of it, I'm going to put a little bit of the charcoal directly onto my chamois. This isn't always the most efficient way of going about something, but it'll work in a pinch, and I just want to be as delicate as I can with that mask. So we cut out our big values that are generalized darks. I left out some of the more detailed elements inside of the ear and the hair itself, which will also be dark. But I'm just going to go ahead and block in these shapes as generalized shadows. It gets a little bit intricate to hold these, but having said that, charcoal tends to be a medium that you use in larger scale. The full range of value is nice, and it's a very physical medium, so you kind of get in there and beat on it. It's not as finicky or as delicate as, say, a pencil or a colored pencil, or some of the other mediums that you may be using when drawing. Okay, I'll pull this away.
Yeah.
There we have it, some basics. So I might not even bother to do something like the lip right through that area, because I think I can manage that with a pencil itself. But one of the things that this is just remarkable for is charcoal doesn't like to make a tight little line. So one of the things that a mask can do so beautifully is I can just cut a few random shapes, not random, but something that approximates a texture, like a hairy edge here, which I just created. And then I can come in here and just use that in a number of places and just kind of and you can see how that does such a great job. And make the back of that head just with an even softer edge. And let's see if I can extend that out just a little bit further. And as you can see, the edges are really ultimately too sharp right now. Some of these we might want to keep, but other ones you might want to roll out. So I can guarantee you that right around the temple there, that's going to be a much, much softer effect on the side of the head that's in generalized shadow. I'll even break that form a little bit along the jawline to see what we can get. And this is a stump.
Tony is using a blending stump. Not only can he soften the edges with the blending stump, but he can extract with the kneaded eraser to soften the edges as well.
Oh, that's true. So if I wanted to take a little bit off of this side, I could pull it. So,
Nice.
so while we identified these more generalized area of shadow inside of this drawing and showed you a couple of techniques for some edges, Dave's going to go in and he is going to hit some generalized area of light. And once again, if you guys can note, we're just avoiding all detail as we go here.
As Tony did before, you can lay it along the paper and blend it in either with your finger or, of course, with the chamois, but the chamois's got so much charcoal in it.
Yeah, you'd almost need to have a lighter chamois just for a white material to make that happen. But one of the things that's kind of worth noting about your finger is if you're kind of hitting it and doing it once, your finger can work just fine. But there's some oils in your hand, and those oils actually will function as a binder and help make that pigment stay on the page. So if your hands are oily, you have to take a moment and make sure that they're not too oily, or they'll really mush it in there for good.
I think that black chamois would work okay with that.
Yeah.
Oh, it's going to pull that white right back out, so I need another chamois, or a paper towel will work fine. Blending.
The reason why we use chamois and not just paper towels or tissues is a tissue has as much ability to remove the stuff that's there as put it down. So if you start with something that's totally clean, it does a good job keeping everything clean. It's looking pretty cool though, Dave. All right. We got our generalized light, and we have our generalized dark. Whenever you want. Yep. So one of the things that's really very helpful when you are using masks to draw, and once again, even though you're drawing, you have a knife out, you have a cutting board, you have all these things available to you while you work, and you will be far more successful. But one of those things is a generalized mask. And a generalized mask is, I like to take a piece of paper, any old piece of paper, and cut a series of curves. Some tight curves, maybe that have a little bump inside of them, some long things that look like a French curve. And that variety of shape is very useful, because if I want to get in there and just make the dark of that lip, it's much easier if I have just a couple of different curves to use in doing that. So I can come here and just go ahead and hit that edge, and it'll produce a nice hard edge along the top, a softer one as it rolls through, and we have just these available to us when we use them in the future. This while you're doing that. So Dave's now cutting out some of the ear, and he was just mentioning to me that sometimes when he cuts a mask, he doesn't fully remove it. He'll let it be more of a flap, and I'm assuming, Dave, do you do that because you like that it helps keep it in the right place too?
Keeps it registered, yes.
Yeah, keeps the registration
and
with that.
And I don't need edge over on this side, only on the back side. So
Gotcha. Oh, that's a really good point.
The old airbrush days here.
Yeah, Dave used a lot of these techniques when doing airbrush projects as well. Let me get a nice shot of that as you're working. There we go.
So I've flapped. Well, can I get through that? There we go. I've flapped this one as well.
Oh, got it. Yeah. Sweet. So he's going to grab a little bit of charcoal. I realized that my little blending stump had some brown on it or some red.
Again, don't be too concerned about edges. We can soften them with the blending stick or kneaded eraser. If you can work some gradient into it, though, to show a little more form, so be it.
And if you ever wanted to just practice this, just to get used to using your masks and doing it, it would be perfectly reasonable the first time you do something like this to just print yourself out a vector graphic from a Google file that you just Google an image, print it out as a vector graphic, and just cut out the shapes individually. It'll help you to see those big generalized forms. I wouldn't recommend it as a way to make your final work, but it's a great learning technique. Looking good, Dave.
And using the negative, positive pieces.
We have a charcoal pencil here now, and I'm sharpening a charcoal pencil with an X-Acto blade because they really don't like a bigger pencil sharpener. It'll just eat it up. And the other reason why I like to do this is when I sharpen that pencil with my X-Acto blade, I get all these little scrunchions of charcoal here, which can be very useful later. You can stump that right on with our blending stump in just a little bit. But there's nothing wrong with just using a pencil too. You don't need to use a mask for absolutely everything. And if in a couple of these instances we want to have a hard edge on two sides, the pencil is just as reasonable as any way of getting some of those.
And of course, to reiterate before, we've got the overall form selected, the overall light and dark values. Tony can now go to detail.
I think I placed my eyeball a little bit low. Maybe Dave's going to come in here and fix it for me. Hopefully. Giving ourselves a little bit more to work with back here. Okay, so I'm actually really, as much as I'm drawing right now, I'm just laying down some extra charcoal to work with once I get back to my blending stump, because that's going to really help tuck those shadows underneath of a hairline, let's say. But one of the things that getting a chance to watch Dave draw, which I had the pleasure to do a number of times, that he really manages is to look for the little bit of reflected light that comes on the underside of things that tucks around, even in shadowed areas. So if you can see that nose, just on the underside of it, you might get just a teeny bit of light. I won't put it down as nicely as he does, that's for sure, but nonetheless we can get it there to make it appear correct. And
always look for reflected light. It'll always help accent volume.
The other thing that you really notice here, and in many ways, these concepts and these ideas are reinforced in multiple classes that you'll take here at the school. But the main thing that you're seeing is that there are no real lines. There's just a change in value. And that's what separates one thing from the next. It's just those changes in value. All contrast is always going to advance on the viewer and come forward. All texture is going to advance and come forward to the viewer. And all things that have diminished contrast are going to recede. And that's intuitively, Dave is just knocking this in. The back of that head was really sitting forward, and right now by him shading it in a little bit, letting it blend with the background, he's letting it wrap around volumetrically in the space that it's articulating. I don't know why our person here looks so distressed and angry.
Who's going to work on that?
But hopefully Dave is going to improve this person's attitude.
How's that?
It's like they're thrilled to be here now. Now they look sarcastic and completely contemptuous. All right.
Finally, do we want those eyelashes and eye? But detail last. We're still not quite there to the detail, and the extraction of medium again for detail works just as well as laying it in there. So I will take up Tony's really fancy, smart little eraser, pulling highlights back off the eyelid here, pulling the white of the eye back out for a little more detail.
Dave, when I'm drawing, I usually try to either use the white of the paper or use the white of a piece of chalk. And you ever find that it gets a little confusing for students when they're trying to do both at the same time, or?
I think I've found that students generally intuitively draw values better working actually on black or gray than on a white surface. I think they just see it.
Yeah.
It's easier.
You're seeing light, so you put light on.
That's correct.
You see something light, you grab a white piece of chalk. When you have to save the white of a paper and sneak a shadow underneath of it, it's pretty counterintuitive, and yet that's what we give kids to do, right?
Right.
It's so rude. That's pretty cool.
Tighten it up as you go. Another important part about working in this kind of a process is, depending on the stylization you prefer, you can quit virtually at many variations of time. From abstract to tighter realism.
Mm-hmm. And here is our little finished product. Thanks a lot for watching.